Hey guys, happy Crocktober. I'm going to be making salsa steak fajitas today. Kat over at Mama Cat's home said that she was going to be putting up a crock pot recipe every Sunday this month and asked if anyone would like to join. So I said sure. I'm a little late putting it up, but I plan to put one up every Sunday going forward for the month of October. This is a recipe I've made with steak and chicken. I do it stovetop, I do it crock pot. Today I'm using beef round top round, which I found for a pretty good price at Costco, but it is not a very tender meat, so I thought it would be perfect to put in the crock pot and just let it cook and get tender that way. So this is the night before. I'm going to get this cut up and I'm going to show you the seasonings I'm going to be using. After I cut it up and get it into the bowl, I'm going to use some olive oil, and then I'm just going to add some salt and pepper, garlic powder, and paprika. I have some cumin, oregano, and some chili powder, and some onion powder. Now I have it cut into the size strips that I want it. I'm just going to start seasoning this up. The one thing I did forget to put in initially was the adobo seasoning, which is great for tenderizing a little bit tougher cut of steak. So after I had it in the fridge for a couple hours, I did add some adobo seasoning also, and I let this sit overnight in the fridge. It was just what I wanted to do. I'm sure you could throw all these seasonings on and put it in the crock pot. It would be just as good, but I had the time the night before, so I just let it marinate overnight. Now it's the next morning, and I've taken out everything that I'm going to add to the meat. Just to show you, this is the adobo seasoning, if you're not familiar with that. This is the flavor I use. They have a couple other kinds. This is just the one I always buy. So I ended up using 2 of the green peppers, and then I used all of the orange, red, and yellow ones that I took out. And today I'm going to be using the Mateo salsa. I love this salsa. I've never made it in this recipe. I always have just used something else that I've had on hand in the jar, but I love the Mateos, so I know that this is going to turn out great. So now I'm just going to get the peppers and onions chopped up, and we're going to get it into the crock pot with our steak. I've cut the peppers and the onions pretty thick. When I make this on the stovetop with chicken, I usually cut it a little bit thinner, but since it's going to be in the crock pot for such a long time and this is not a super tender cut of meat, I didn't want them to be too thin. I added a little less than half of that jar of salsa to the bottom, and then I added half of the peppers and onions. I ended up using all of the meat. I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning, this was just under 3 pounds of meat. So I put all of the meat on there. I added the rest of the salsa, and I also added almost the full jar I filled with water, put that in there. I set this on low, and after 3 hours, I checked it, and the meat was still very tough. And my crock pot cooks quick. So what I did at that point was I set it on high, and I let it go for 2 more hours. While that was cooking, I decided just to make some plain white rice, and I added 1 can of Rotel. This is still a couple hours till dinner time, but I just got that done and put it on the back of my stove. After 2 more hours on high, the peppers and the onions were done. I didn't want to leave them in there any longer. The meat was getting nice and tender, so I decided to leave the meat in for another hour, but I took these out, and about 10-15 minutes before we were ready to eat, I threw them back in just to warm them up, but I didn't want to leave them in for another hour because they would have probably totally disintegrated. So I'm glad that I did the extra hour with the meat, and I'm also glad I turned it up to high. Here for the rice, I'm just throwing it in a baking dish, and then I'm going to add some cheddar cheese, mix that in, add a little more cheddar to the top, and I popped it in the oven for about 20-25 minutes. I think I had it set at 350. And once that came out, then it was time for our fajitas. So now I'm going to show you my plate. Here's how I served mine. I just put it on a flour tortilla with some cheese and sour cream. I had an avocado I sliced up. I had some of that rice, and I had just opened a can of refried beans to serve on the side. Super easy, super good dinner. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed, please do. I'd love to have you around. Thanks again for watching, you guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.